riding bikes, even be street bikes, dirt bikes, or whatever, something changes in you. It's like you get to feel this love of life, and you forget everything else that's going on in life. You forget about what problems or whatever happened to you before. You're literally just focused on that next turn, that next jump, that next high speed turn in a canyon. And it gives you these momentary breaks that allow you to become a stronger, better person. And that first year is when Dungy snapped at me in the press conference.
Mhm.
That was like my second press conference. And I took the online beating of my life. I don't know if you go back and read the comments on those videos. Nobody knew who I was. I was this anonymous guy. My words got taken out of context and they destroyed me. And I went, oh, okay. I was just playing around now. But if you're going to trash me, I'm going all in on this bitch. Let me show you what I can do.
Meet the Guest. Next chapter. Part of the Coach Robb Podcast Network.
Welcome back to another episode of Meet the Guest Next Chapter. This episode is brought to you by Complete Med Solutions. It's a premier blood evaluation company for both health and wellness. If you guys have been around the moto world for any extended period of time, today's guest is not somebody, how do we say this? It's somebody that you definitely are aware of, somebody who's got a big voice on the YouTube and inside our sport. Mr. Chris Cooksey, how are you, buddy?
Coach, that's a great way to describe it. They go, who's this guy and why does he know that?
Well, we're very fortunate. We have a very mixed demo that watches this show. We've had some triathletes on. We've had obviously some racers. You're our first journalist that's on here. So I want to, for those of you that are not involved in motocross, Chris has a very extensive background, and depending on where this conversation goes, I will give the Cliff Note version that started out as a racer, moved into journalism, and is now one of our top YouTubers. If you are new to the channel and or don't know Chris specifically, I'd highly encourage you to go over to him on YouTube. And there's just a plethora of videos, playlists, and everything else, perspectives, insight. So, Chris, man, I can't thank you enough. I know that our schedules are difficult to get lined up. I know that you just got done jet setting with a couple of our dear friends. And this is a big weekend of racing, and we're not going to talk one thing about it. How's that?
That's great. That's great. I had such a good weekend hanging out, and our friends you're talking about, the Grondall family, such great people. We just hung out, and it's rare that you meet people, really cool people, and you go, you know what, we're friends for life. And the way that Mike has built the family and raised those kids, like, they're just a pleasure to be around. And you can't say that about everybody. So anytime I get with the Grondall family it's appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough, Chris. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a long time. I know that your journey to the top has not been an easy one. And just for the sake of anybody who knows you directly or maybe doesn't know you, I don't think many people know extensively your background. They only know you where you're at today. Give us a little bit of insight where you started out. How'd you get here?
Oh man, are we starting in the beginning when I was racing as a kid, coach?
Absolutely.
Because that's, my racing kind of peaked as a kid. Like I did really good in, I raced a couple years in Utah, became state champ, and I rode the Race of Champions with some such notable guys as Ezra Lusk, Damon Huffman, Craig Decker. Pingree was around there, Mike Metzger. That's the generation of kids that I grew up racing. And it was crazy. People ask me a lot of times why I'm so hard on mini dads, because I've seen it firsthand. And my dad wasn't the worst, but we have had our own issues, and I've got my own issues related to that. And I see these dads living through their kids. The Dazzy Lawrence situation makes me want to vomit. But I've seen it so many. I remember, and I don't know if Metzger will care if I say this or not, but I remember his dad screaming at him at World Mini. And I'm like, him and I just went out on that track, fought our asses off around 7th or 8th place. And we both gave it. And I was just like, I was going over there to tell him, like, great race, man. I know we weren't up front, but dude, we were fighting so hard. And it was such a great race. And his dad was screaming at him. And he looks at me and he goes, you let that guy beat you? I'm like, holy crap, what a tool, man. But but it was commonplace and people are so accepting of it. But that's probably part of the reason that I get so mad when I see it nowadays, is like, it has become accepted. And I saw it firsthand. I felt it. And racing's tough, and I went from there to, I did the race of champions, turned pro in 125. It didn't go real well from there, coach. Like I
Are you
said,
talking about are you talking about the Kawasaki Race of Champions?
yeah, the Kawasaki race of champions in 1990 at the World Mini. For those that don't know, what they did is they
Yeah, I was
brought.
going to say these young kids won't know any of this, but the parents
So
should.
I know it's crazy that they did this. Could you imagine trying to get the top amateurs now with all the contracts they have to be able to ride different bikes? So they took the top riders that won anything in their area, the nationals, whatever, and they said, all right, you're invited. We have 15 bikes from 15 identically prepared KX80s from Pomona Kawasaki. You guys are going to race them in a 3-moto format, race of champions, and we're going to find out who the best mini rider is anywhere. And and that's what we did. And I think I ended up 7th overall, but I was running good. I was right behind Ezra Lusk. He was in 2nd, and he had a huge crash, and I had nowhere to go, and I ran over him. I was more concerned that I'd killed him, but we got up, and Ezra, he's a great dude. We talk on Instagram once in a while. He remembers that. He's like, yeah, you hit me pretty hard, but I'm like, you laid down in front of me. I had nowhere to go. And yeah, if you remember the old World Mini track, some people will. They had this thing called the Dubach double because it was 2 singles, and Doug Dubach doubled them. From then on, everyone's trying to double it, and we're trying to do it on these 80s. And we were doing it in the expert class. But then when we got on these stock Kawasaki's, it took everything we had. And yeah, we both had a good laugh about how slow the stock ones were. My Suzuki was better, but I'm sure his factory Suzuki was way better. But yeah, we had a hard time getting over the Dubach doubles. We got on the equal bikes.
Isn't it kind of crazy when you mention Suzuki? You think about R&D Suzuki. You just think about the legend of that. You think about that amateur Suzuki program that had, the Eli Tomac's, the Ian Treadles, the Austin Stroops, the Nico Izzies, and the list goes on. And it's just so hard to think that we don't even have a yellow 85 on the gate anymore. It's just astounding to me how far we've come, not for the better in that 85 class for sure.
Yeah, it's wild, And then, a lot of the other thing people ask me is like, how would you know about the journey to turn pro? Because that was my journey. Every single kid that was in that race of champions, I can look back at the class photo. Half of us went on to be the top guys in, the racing world, and half of us got hurt or had something happen. But almost everybody has a story in there, and it's tough, man, to deal with that. And, people talk about after racing, how hard it is. And even for guys like Ryan Dungey at the top level, it doesn't matter when that's pulled from you, you lose your identity. And that happened to me just a couple years after that peak. I went pro in the 125, and I was looking at Supercross in 92. We had talked with, I forget the guy's name at Pro Circuit. It wasn't Mitch, but I talked with somebody over there. They were watching. They were also looking at Jimmy Gaddis. So my dad and I went out to Colorado. A guy by the name of Stacy Cook put on a fair race. And it was a crazy race for big money, and he built a legit Supercross track. And I remember looking at it going, oh boy. But there was like a double and then to a triple. And I was like, man, I don't know if I can get that triple off the double. But, the attitude that I had as a kid is like, okay, I want to win. So if Jimmy Gaddis does it, then I'm going to do it. And I got behind him, doubled, and on that factory Suzuki, because that's what he was on at the time, just and got the triple. And I was on the 1990 125. This is 91. So I'm already behind the 8-ball, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking for excuses. My dad did everything he could to get me the best bike, but it bogged. If anyone remembers those bikes, when you doubled, they had a carburetor, and Boysen even came up with a solution where it swirled the gas later on. But if you landed hard, it would just bog. So I hit the double, went for the triple. I'm already committed, and it pinned both my arms like this against the handlebars, compound fractured both arms when I come up short on the triple. Because it was like the perfect storm. The bike bogs, I go to triple, and it was those junky upside down forks. It was the first year they'd put them on the 125. So if you didn't hit perfect, they didn't absorb. So I might as well have had like a mountain bike. There was no give, and it just snapped my arms. And for all intents and purposes, that was my racing career. It kind of ended right there, but then it got weird after that. So
How old were you when you broke your arms?
16.
Okay.
So I'm 16 years old, skated through school. Everybody I always got a pass because they're like, well, he's going to race dirt bikes anyway. It was just a given that I was going to be a pro racer. My parents, that's how I was treated. I do talk about it like a lot of the child actor type stuff. I look at the shit that I got away with, coach, and I'm like, yeah, they probably should have not let me do that. But I felt a bit of stardom and entitlement at that age that they all have to feel. So when I see it from the outside, that's why I'm always talking to these parents like, no, you gotta rope this in. You don't understand quite what's happening here in these developmental years, but to have all that completely ripped from me. So I break both my arms. It's gnarly. I still want to race. Then I come back and they set wrong. So they had to go back in, do another reset. Then it happened again. So I had 3 separate surgeries in 3 weeks on these arms. They finally ended up with plates on both my wrists. And I mean, as a kid, I mean, I'm sitting there and they put casts up to here. It's borderline cruel. They don't do that anymore, but that's what my doctor did to me. I couldn't touch my mouth. I couldn't wipe my ass. You take a 16-year-old kid and just do that during the summer. I was 6'2". I dropped about 115, 116 pounds. I mean, I looked like Ethiopian. When I finally got my casts off, I tried to bench press just the bar and I couldn't. So it was a hard time, man. And I had told my dad after the 3rd surgery, I think I'm done. And he's like, yes, you're done. And he's getting a lot of heat from my family. They're like, hey, what are you doing to your kid, man? Why are you? Because my brother had broke his femur the year before. And they could see I love my dad, but he was doing it for him. He wasn't doing it for me. He was doing it because he was living his dream through me. He wanted to be a professional mechanic. And when he saw, it's funny how the phone stops ringing and people stop talking about you when you have a serious injury. And it was almost instant. Like there was no more talk of Supercross or getting onto the pro circuit team. Once I broke my arms, I was done and that was it. And I think my dad could see that combined with the family pressure. He's like, yeah, you're done. Because probably about 6 weeks after, when I get the casts off and stuff, I'm like, hey, I think I want to ride again. And my dad's like, no. I'm like, what? What do you mean no? Like, we have this whole goal, this whole thing we're working towards. And it messed with me for a long time. At one point that same year, so this is in the summertime that I broke my arms. I come home from school, I think it was October, and I was ready. I was getting ready. I wanted to ride again, and I was pushing him to ride again. I come home, and he had traded my bikes for go-karts, racing go-karts. And not one for me. My brother got one. He got one. My brother's girlfriend got one, but I didn't get one. It was really weird. It messed with me a lot. And it's still, to this day, I still have to kind of forgive him for that. And he's like, well, you said you didn't want one. I said I didn't want one because I wanted to race dirt bikes. But you shouldn't have moved on without me. That hurt, man. It was brutal.
Yeah, I can't even now this is still 16, summer of being 16 years old, right?
Yeah, so you go with what 16-year-old goes through. And I'm also, oh, crap, what happened to my mic here?
You're back. You're good.
Okay. I don't know why. It's like showing on my screen. It's going on my board. Sorry.
You just broke up there for a little bit.
Okay, how's that?
Yep, that's good right now.
I'll stop. I won't touch it.
No, that's all good. So what I'll do is I'll have them edit this out. So I'll ask the question. So that was the summer when you were you were still 16 when the bikes got sold.
I can go back and start where I was at.
That's okay. Go for it.
So I'm 16. I'm going through all the crazy stuff that a typical 16-year-old goes through with the death of a career. My whole life, when you asked me what I was doing in school, I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have, so I'm going to be a professional racer. If that doesn't work, I'm going to be a fireman or what. I didn't have one. I just was 1000% positive. There was no way in my life that I wasn't going to be one of those top guys. And to have it yanked from you right in that developmental process, it messed with me. I was not a good student and probably not a good person for a couple of years there, just trying to figure that out. I mean, I gave my parents hell and they just probably thought I was being a bad kid, but I was dealing with the death of a career and trying to figure out who the heck I was, because without racing, I mean, I was just this nerdy kid. When I was racing, I wasn't a nerdy kid. At least I was still a nerd, but I had something, and now I had nothing. And it was tough, man. And I look at these other kids and even other riders. I mean, you don't have to be at the top level to go through something like that. And I can't imagine how that would have been had I gone through an entire career, had to deal with it at 30. And that's what a lot of the other guys do. So so I have an insight as to how that feels and what that does to a person. But yeah, I thought I'd gotten it out of my system. And nope, when I was 18, I went and did it again.
You did what again? Got back into it?
Yeah, I couldn't afford a bike when I was in high school. I wanted one, dreamed of one. couldn't believe that I wasn't. I'm watching Metzger and all these guys riding Supercross where I should have been in my mind, and it just ate at me. And my parents were dead set. Nope, they will not help me one iota. So I got a job at Honda Suzuki of Salt Lake, worked, and I didn't have enough money to buy a real bike. So I bought a 1987 CR 500 because I knew I could ride the bigger bikes. And I had, I was tall and I had a little bit of talent, but I knew if I was going to get an older one, it had to be a bigger one because you can get away with it. Rode that for a while, had an absolute blast, but I was like, and I was actually, as stupid as I am, you'll find a pattern in this. I find a goal, and then I just start doing different things to work towards it, even if it's a ridiculous goal, whether it be racing in motocross or whatever. But in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm 18. How can I still make this dream work? Let me buy this 87 CR 500, have this guy, Eric Gore, do the suspension for me. And it worked pretty good. And I'm like, okay, next year I'm going to go try and ride Washugal in the 500 National. That'll get me an attention. If I can do that on an A7 in 1991, I'll turn some heads and the dream's back. But they got rid of the 500 Nationals. And I was like, oh man, what do I do now? So at that point, then I bought a sport bike and worked a ski resort for 1 year. That was fun. And that's the other thing I think that has been a blessing in disguise. Well, had I continued racing, I never would have got to do all these side ventures that I did, working in a ski resort, moving to college. I was a limo driver in college, but I still wasn't completely done with the racing dream. It's funny how this racing thing goes and comes. Okay, I'm gonna sell the 500. I get a sport bike. I ride for a while. And I want a moto again. So 95 rolls around. I get this KX 250. I go out and I rupture my spleen, broke my shoulder. I had some nasty injuries because I went out riding with this kid. He's kind of a knucklehead. I can't stand him. His name's Posey. He was a state champ in Utah. And he was always like way worse than me on 80s. So when he was the top guy, I'm like, I'll just go out there and kick his ass and that'll be easy. So I went and practiced at his track and I was just working him. And I'd been off the bike for how many years? And I'm on a year-old KX 250 used that I bought working him. I'm like, oh, I got this. I just got too big for my britches. Went for this big double and I ate it so hard. Oh, it was tough. It was tough.
Is that where you ruptured your spleen? Was then?
Yeah, ruptured the spleen, shoulder. So then I get rid of that one, but I get another job.
How old are you?
18, 19, right around there.
Okay.
So I get a
3 years removed from high school, being frustrated, trying to find your way, and now you're back 3 years later. Now you're banged up. Are you still living at home? You out on your own? What are you dealing with?
Living at home. And
is that like going home all beaten and battered and torn up, knowing that your parents weren't?
They weren't pleased.
Yeah.
No, it was a very awkward time. My mom to this day says dirt bikes ruined her life. She always had to see us, and no matter how mad she was, she still always took care of me when I was injured and did that. But she's like, "Why are you doing this?" I'm like, "I just like it. It's fun." And it was tough. And meanwhile, my brother and dad are off racing go-karts, and my brother went really far. He still does that to this day. He has a racing go-kart shop, and he's pursuing IndyCar. So I'll be honest with you, my dad, living the dream through his kids, went with my brother at this point because he had the most potential to get somewhere. And like I said, that stung with me for a while. And I'll give him all due credit. I don't think he even understands that he was doing that. And he has apologized to me. He's like, dude, I didn't even know. I didn't even realize I was doing that. And I didn't know you felt that way. So,
sure.
It took a lot of years to work through that. But yeah, I got another bike after I got healed up and got a new job at a different place in South Valley Yamaha. And I was like, it was 1995. So I raced motocross for a few more years. I would pick an arena cross. I did the Denver arena cross, Salt Lake arena cross. I could make mains, but I wasn't getting where I wanted to go. And I'm like, I'm getting older and it's not going anywhere. I'm working, I'm riding bikes I don't have enough money to do what I need to do to get to all the races. I'm getting beat by that Posey kid. I'm like, God, I know I'm better than him. This sucks. My arms are getting pumped up because I had so much scar tissue from the wrists. It was just tough. And this guy comes in, great guy, Brad Bolton. The Utah fans will know who I'm talking about. I think he'd smoked a bowl in the car and he's just high as a kite. He's 30 years old. He's been a local pro, a very successful local pro. He missed making the Vegas Supercross by one position 1 year. So he had a hell of a career. Dude's talented, good rider, but he's 30 years old. I asked where he was living, and he said his sister's parents' basement. And I was like, what? Wait a second. I just had this glimpse to, this is my path. If I don't do something different, I'm going to be Brad Bolton, chasing the dream, 30 plus years old, broke, living in some girlfriend's parents' basement. Not that, I mean, listen, Brad's a great guy. I know he's doing really well now, but I looked at that and I was like, oh my gosh, you have these moments in your life when you stop and look and you go, okay, this is a fork in the road. What do I do? I thought about it. I went home and I was like, you know what? I'm selling everything. I called my buddy who lived in Arizona, was going to college. I go, dude, you're going to college, right? I need to do something because I can't go on the same path I'm on. It's not going to go well. I'm going to be injured, even worse. So I got to let this racing thing go. Sold everything, moved to Arizona and started to go to college at Arizona State.
And what year would this be and how old are you? So from 16 with broken arms.
16 to 22.
Okay.
15 to
So
22.
I just think it's cool that people put that in perspective. You know, Roger Federer has a comment. He says, an elite athlete dies twice, one when he physically passes away and the other is when his career comes to an end. And you've really piqued my interest with this because you've had 3 careers, 16, double broken arms, dad sells everything, you get it back, you go racing, things don't go so well, you obliterate yourself again, you get back into it. Now one guy walks in the shop and it was the epiphany that caused you to go to school in a very short period of time. So I want you to hit the e-brake for just a second, because this is what catches our listeners' ears. How does Chris Cooksey, why does Chris Cooksey, what is it that makes Chris Cooksey get up one more time? Only up to 22. I'm not talking about where you're at now. 16 to 22 to get up that many times after getting punched in the face by Mike Tyson. That's the kind of the equivalent that I look at it. 16 double compound arms, 3 surgeries for each. Dad sells everything, come home, especially to come home from school. See that? It's like, you know, it's like you got sold. How do you do this? How do you get up 3 times from a career that's been essentially doors been closed for you now 3 times?
I don't know, coach. You just do. I don't know that you just, it's not like there's no formula. You just go one week. You can't quit. I mean, and I thought about it and I had some down moments. And when I bought that sport bike in between the CR 500 and the next run in motocross, I just went back to Utah this weekend, hung out in Park City, and we drove some of the canyons. And I was showing my girlfriend Crystal, I was like, I used to go down this canyon at like 120 miles an hour and just rail these turns. And my buddy crashed over here. And I'm like, it's amazing I made it through that one, coach. Like, I think of how many near-death experiences I had. I mean, my buddy Eric Jones and I would go to this canyon. It was called East Canyon. And there was a Utah Sport Bike Club where all the local racers would ride together. And they saw us and they were like, oh, they're going to show us what's up in the canyon. Eric and I flat destroyed them. And they were like, well, we don't have our leathers on them. Neither do we, dumbass. Like, they're on CBR 900s and we smoked them. We just embarrassed. And this is like the top local road racers. Eric is actually, he went on to be king of the mountain and do all this good road racing stuff in Utah. But yeah, it's just, I look at that though, and I think of the risks I took. And I think a lot of that was, that I don't really care what happens because, you struggle and you get to those points where luckily something in me kept going. And, I will say this, riding bikes, even be street bikes, dirt bikes or whatever, something changes in you. It's like you get to feel this love of life and you forget everything else that's going on in life. You forget about what problems or whatever happened to you before. You're literally just focused on that next turn, that next jump, that next high speed turn in a canyon. And it gives you these momentary breaks that allow you to become a stronger, better person. And I truly believe a lot of people, if they really look at dirt bikes in that sense and don't look at it just as an ends to a means, but a way to grow your mind. And I mean, people meditate, people pay thousands and thousands of dollars trying to figure out how to get to that mental state we get to on a regular basis.
Once again, you've piqued my interest because I know that there's listeners out there who feel the same way that you do, similar experiences. How would you describe, you're 16 years old, what motivates you to get out of bed every day is to become a champion. And then when you put a closure on something, then you deal with the devastation and the disappointment. When I say devastation, not snowflakes like we have today that somebody hurt your feelings, right? We're not talking about that. talking about 16 years old, there's a close to a chapter, and it's like the draw of the next chapter. And I don't know if I can articulate this well enough. The chapter you closed was revitalized because of your passion for what you missed, and what you were doing made you injured, right? You pull through the injury because of the love of doing it again. Your case was a little bit different because literally bikes were sold, everything was gone. You had to start from zero all over again, not as a victim, just reality. Don't you find it interesting? The stuff that pulls us into an injury is exactly what pulls us through an injury. I've never seen anything like it. Now, I will say, no matter what sport you're in, talk to a football player, soccer player, wakeboarder, right? I think sport does that to you, but there seems to be, maybe we're just biased because it's still, one of our biggest passions is we love to be on two wheels. There's just, like you've talked about, just even being on your e-bike recently. It's bringing up memories that you just desperately miss. But I just find it so fascinating that what puts us in those positions is the exact same thing that pulls us through those darkest days. And that's why I'm fascinated the fact that you've had your career closed on you, literally visually closing a chapter, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And I'm still intrigued as to, I wish I could download your thoughts at 16 years old in your bedroom alone, madder than a hornet, right? What would you say for somebody who's young listening to this that might be in their early teens or late teens, early 20s, and they're dealing with the same thing? What words of advice do you give them to pull through that?
Well, I would tell them, you're probably lucky because if you stay on that one track, like I said, if I had continued, signed with a factory and gone that way, I would only know one aspect of life, coach. And that's how I've been able to deal with it is I look at it and go, you know what? I got really lucky. So you take where I'm at the age 35, and I also look at Damon Huffman and Ezra Lusk. The different life experiences. I didn't get to be a professional racer. I never stood on the podium. I never did any of the stuff that we dream of, but I got to do a crap load of stuff that I didn't. They didn't get to work at a ski resort one winter. They had everyone watching them. I got to do what I wanted. I got to go to college, being a limo driver. I just look at all the different life experiences. What I would say is just know you can go back to dirt bike racing and you can do it, but you don't have to make it everything. If you can just make it a portion. And that's something that us as dirt bike riders struggle with. We all go all in all the time. And that's where later on, when I got out of college and got back into dirt bikes again, I was able to just enjoy it because I would just pick events and I would just say, okay, I'm going to train for this event and then I'll take a break. And I chose my own season on my own terms. And, it's fun. I got to do that. But
Let's hit the pause button for just a moment because you've had 3 definitive chapters. Of those 3, 16, door closes, you blow your scapula, all 3 of those stages, which one was the most difficult?
Oh, without a doubt, the 16-year-old one. Like that was the one where, the other times when I start riding again, like you've got the dream, but I know it's probably not going to happen. And on that one, the dream was happening. There was no chance it wasn't. So, I don't think my parents ever knew what I went through on that. That one was tough, man. I lost everything, my identity. They wonder why I was such a dick when I was a teenager, but I think that has a lot to do with it. I was angry and I never really got over it. And I made it through school, but like if you needed a C to pass the class, I gave you a C. That's all I did, and I didn't turn to drugs or the stuff that some people do, but some people go that route. Luckily, I didn't go that route. I always think in the back of my mind, I never wanted to lose the fitness or capability if I did get another shot at it. So, I don't know. I left unfulfilled completely.
I'm going to preface this question by just confessing, I was married for 25 years and was in counseling for 15. So when I ask you this question, I want to make sure that I set the context. Did you go to counseling after that chapter was closed at 16 to try to deal with some of the disappointment? No? Okay.
No. That was that was in the generation, coach, before counseling where you just suck it up, buttercup. Like,
yeah,
I probably should have, but I didn't. And sometimes I think that it also, by not going to counseling, I figured out how to deal with stuff my own way and it didn't destroy me. And that's the thing is if these things don't destroy you, you do come out stronger on the other end. But I probably could have used some counseling, but no, I didn't get any.
Well, and just to clarify for anybody who's interested, please don't look at going and getting counseling as being weak. I had to go to a counselor because, like our counselor told us, we were at gridlock, right? We both saw it our own way and we needed a mediator to kind of unstick some of the pieces. So by no means, if you're seeking counsel or if you're looking for counselor help or think you need it, by all means, get it. And then, like you say, do something with it. It's like, Chris, you and I have talked about this off the air. I'm always amazed when people are like, hey, this year I'm going to read 52 books. And I'm like, how about just read one and do something that the book encourages you to do instead of just reading a bunch of books, right? I say to our coaches all the time, what's the definition of behavior modification? It's changing your behavior after you learn something. So if I can explain to you the why behind it and you choose not to do anything, then you've essentially not learned anything. And that's why I think it's so impressive at 16 years old to dig out of that. And I commend you. You didn't go down the dark path. And I'm not judging anybody who did. I know we've got a lot of listeners that have reached out and said they did go down the path. We know some professional guys that went down that path, and unfortunately, they're no longer with us because of that. So there's a lot to unpack here. When you talk about the idea of
Coach, I got a Craig. It was a pretty dark path there for a little while though. Like I'm not a guy that looks down. I think thieves are garbage. They're the worst people in the world. But my buddy and I wanted jet skis, and these guys left them out. We took them. Man, I do remember just feeling, I have never felt so much guilt and remorse. I'm like, why did we do that? That's the scummest. So, I mean, it got dark, and, we ran from the cops on our bikes, the sport bikes, to the point where I had to, I was telling my girlfriend about this. We actually had so many cops after us. My friend Brandon got away. And he had went towards my parents' house at the time. They were out of town. They had blocked off every intersection. I didn't know where to go. I went to the airport and parked my bike and called him, and he came back in the car to get. So listen, it got pretty dark, Coach. There were I just didn't do the drug route. I did stupid.
Sure. Well, in looking back in hindsight, what I think is so fascinating is look at the things that you did out of anger for that chapter closing, and the chapter got closed because of the injuries, and the things that you did put yourself in as much peril, if not worse. We could always die, right? You could die walking across the street. We recognize that. But, 100 plus miles an hour running from the police officers on an interstate with, the way they block the interstate, put things out on the road to slow you down, you could have ended up as harmed or worse than racing moto, whatever worse is, right? Dead is dead. But you get the gist of what I'm saying. The disappointment led to this other adverse behavior, and the result ends up being almost the exact same thing. So to me, when you get into human psychology and our coping mechanisms and perspectives, that's why I love doing this show. Is there's people who are listening to this that can't even remotely relate to what you're talking about, and then there's some that are like, I did worse than Chris did. Everybody's got their situation, and that's what I love about everybody who's been on the show has always been so authentic and said, hey, look, man, like you're saying, 16 years old, how many of us could honestly deal with that kind of disappointment without just going AWOL? So I'm very impressed that you've been able to do that, not once, not twice, but 3 like that. When you look at your ability to dig out of these holes, what would you say motivates you more? Is it more the enjoyment of success, or is it more the fear of failure and the adverse, what could be?
That's a good question. I don't know. I dig out of holes because I don't know. I have that, and I think, I don't know, Coach. I'm kind of lost on that one. I don't know why I do it. I just want to be better. And just like in racing, like anytime you race, like even if you win, you think about what you could have done to be better. And I've tried to apply that to life and figure out different ways to be better. Okay, I can do this. I never want to settle. I feel like that's the most disgusting thing in the world, is to settle. And I know it's not. And sometimes you have to like do stuff, and sometimes it's okay to just be happy with content with what you're at. But I also have this drive, and I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where it comes from or why, but I always feel like I need to one up or keep going forward, or I'm going to get passed. I don't know why I have that kind of a fear all the time. I always feel like if I'm not progressing, I'm going to fall behind everybody. It's like kind of like that fear of missing out. But I just think that in life in general, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse.
Well, let me ask you this then. Working with as many athletes as we have for the last 40 years, I'm amazed how many people are paralyzed by the fear of success. They put this undue pressure on themselves that they think, well, if I'm successful, then there's this quote unquote pressure next week to do as well or better. How much of that did you feel for yourself, or did you not feel it at all?
Oh, absolutely. You feel it a lot because and then athletes do this a lot. People will say, well, how did that athlete that's paid by Honda with all this effort, you think they didn't give their all? How could they do that? Or why did they go partying the night before? Because there's this terrifying fear inside of us that if you give everything and you give your best and you come up short, you're a loser. And if you did go party or you have something you can still fix, but if you give everything, but what I try to tell people is at some point in this, I figured out it's actually a lot easier to live with failure when you give it all. If you don't, it will haunt you. It will absolutely haunt you. And maybe that's why I felt haunted by the first one. But later on, when I do stuff, as long as I give everything that I have and everything capable, I can live with failure, coach. I can, as long as I know that I did what I could. And then, you know what? Maybe that's not your path. I feel like I'm a big manifestation guy, and I believe things that you want and that you go for will appear in your life, not in the exact same way you want them to. And that's what you have to be careful for, is they don't show up exactly how you want them to, and they make you earn them.
The part that's interesting to me is if you talk to any successful entrepreneurs, they'll tell you they've all failed multiple times. Whether you look at Babe Ruth, right? They say that he had the most home runs, but they also said he had the highest strikeout rate of anybody in the Major League Baseball at the time. And this isn't to get on a political soapbox, but I think it's one of the things that's a disservice to today's young kids is, we educate them to get the test score so that the school can get the funding instead of asking the kids, did you understand the subject? We've got kids that have no deductive reasoning skills. We have kids that can't get out of a wet paper bag. There's just all these little jokes that are out there, but I don't like the word fail. I shouldn't say it that way. I like to rephrase the word failure. To me, the only way you can fail is to not try. That's it. Bottom line, not try or give up. Because if you look at the most successful people, they'll all tell you they learn more from their failures than their success. And what makes somebody more and more incrementally successful is you got to fail a lot. Now, what is the definition of failure? Oh, it didn't work out. Whatever it is, like for yourself, going off to college. I don't know if college was easy for you or not. Do you mind elaborating? Was school easy for you?
Well, and that's what's funny too, is so my parents were way down on the idea of me going to college. They're like, no, you barely got through high school. Come on. And I'll be honest with you, I could, because I got so much leeway because I was going to be a professional racer. I could barely read when I got to college. It was bad. I had to go to the writing center when I got to my junior year at ASU. The teacher's like, listen, we're in the era of emails. You're at a 6th grade level, man. You got to do, so I had to do some hard work to catch up. But it's funny how when I decided it on my own, my parents didn't support me. I got my own student loans. I did it on my own. And I was like, okay, now I'm focused on this. This is now my motocross right now. I finished in 3.5 years. It wasn't easy. And I wouldn't consider myself scholarly, but when you're focused and you drive and go after it, it's crazy how much better you can do. And, that's why I see people telling their kids, like, there's that drive to really be successful has to come from a person. No parent or mentor can ever give that to somebody. But you can take that and you can help direct it the right way. But that motivation to be better, and for me, it was paying for my own school. If I don't finish, now I just wasted how much of my own money, and I'm not even have a degree to get more money. Like, kind of put myself against the wall. And it was another way for me, I was kind of lost after racing. I didn't know what. So I said, at least while I go to school, I'll be working towards a degree while I can figure out my next move, because I never want to be stagnant. That's that whole fear of being stagnant. So if I can at least get my degree while I'm trying to figure it out, instead of just sitting home having what they call those gap years, doing nothing, and then all of a sudden you're a bigger loser in 4 years, I at least wanted to have a degree instead of being a bigger loser.
When you look at what you just said right there, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to know if you agree or disagree with me. From what you just said, you've always appreciated the things that you've achieved because you had to work. Early on, everything was kind of given to you, that red carpet ride. You were obviously showed some talent. Everybody dodes all over you. They kind of float you around on a red carpet ride. Like you said, that added to the level of insult and disappointment when all of a sudden that disappeared. Like you say, phones weren't ringing at the time. When you look back at everything that you've done, you mentioned earlier you got lucky. I always say luck is where hard work meets opportunity, right? There's all these different ways that we can take a comment and not so much spin it, but it's just, you have to put it in the perspective of a reality. When you look at everything that you've just articulated, right? You're paying for school. Therefore, you're like, well, wait, I don't want to squander 3 years of putting work in, not finish it. Now I've got school debts, but no degree. How much of that do you think? Because I've argued with some so-called greatest of all time athletes in our sport that have said champions are born. I vehemently disagree, because I've seen people that have more talent in their pinky than somebody in their entire body. And the person that's got the work ethic always supersedes. That's what I love about Mitch Payton. His big thing is our salaries are competitive, but if you want to get wealthy, you win championships, you'll be wealthy. You're going to get compensated on results. And I've always loved that. I've firmly believed when you give somebody $1 million a year contract, I believe you drive complacency. Don't care what sport it is. But if you drive it on results oriented, you get 100% out of that athlete. It's the same thing in the business world, right? When you learn to not get paid by the hour, you learn to get paid by value. YouTube is compensating you on value. There's 1,000,001 content providers that are out there, but because you're providing value, you can make a living as a YouTuber on top of your real estate and all your other obligations. Again, you're a man that's very diversified. How much of that do you think comes from the belly? As I said, I can't create the fire in the belly. You said the same thing a few minutes ago. I totally agree with you on that one. Where in your experience, either you can speak for yourself, you can throw your brother into the equation, people that you've worked with, people that you've raced against, where is that perfect mixture? No, there's no such thing as perfect, but where is that ideal mixture where you've got the raw talent, you've got the fire in the belly, and then like you did, you appreciated everything that you worked for, and then you stack that year over year, decade over decade. In your opinion, how is that mixture best designed? If you could do it over, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently if you were your own son?
I don't know. See, that's the thing is I look back at my life and people say they wouldn't change anything. They're lying because everybody would. I would make sure I didn't break my arms because that sucked. But how do you learn the lessons that I got out of that? Because I got some invaluable lessons and some, I got some hard times, but those hard times have helped me later on. So I don't know. And I will give my dad a lot of credit. That's something he taught me from day one. He said, you know what? It doesn't matter how much talent someone has if they don't utilize it, if they don't maximize it. He said, every once in a while, you'll get this dream team where somebody's insanely talented and they work as hard or harder than everyone else. But a lot of times you see super talented or hard worker, but the hard worker does always come out on top. And there's you can always outwork. And that's just something that he put into my head that you can always do. And my parents were young when they had us, so they didn't have a ton of money. So he was scrambling, and I watched how hard he worked to keep us racing and do the different stuff. And by no means was he a perfect parent, but damn, they worked their ass off. And I think a lot of my inner drive just comes from him and seeing how they made do with what they had, and they never complained. And I don't know, it's just, and I don't know the balance between your original question of how much is driven and what was the exact question again?
Like the idea of, you've got somebody that's got the fire in the belly, then you've got somebody who has the work ethic, then you have that element of perseverance. You seem to have all of them. And if you're running those at 33% across the board, you've got that 1% that's still left. What do you think it is that has gotten you to where you're at? Because let's face it, if we were doing a movie on this, it seemed like it was a pretty dismal start.
Yeah, it
seemed like you would be where you're at. It wouldn't seem like you'd get to where you're at.
Peaked really early, man. That was fun being, king of the state, riding 80s, and I mean, it was. I was on to glory, and and then to have that ripped, it got real dark there for a while. But it's funny how it all comes back around, and I don't know. And also being a limo driver in Arizona when I was in college, that was fun, and that was one of those things too where I just said, you know what, I'm too clumsy to be a waiter, and that's what all my friends were. I'm like, I'm going to be a limo driver. They're like, have you ever done it? I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. They're like, but nobody hires limo drivers that are 23. I'm like, I'm going to find, I just picked up the phone book, started calling, and I made it happen. And I was like, damn it, I did it again. So I feel, and that's part of, like, I just believe that if I believe something, you can't just believe it and wish on it. You have to take actions, and you got to be willing to take no a few times. But I made it happen. And then I would talk to people in a limousine. Every opportunity I got to talk to these rich, successful people, I would ask them. And it was funny. A lot of them told me, just so you know, you're going to be very successful. I go, what do you mean? They're like, because you care. I know this is only driving a limo, but you care enough to make sure you do it right. You get the door, you drive good. If you take pride in anything, you will take pride in everything. And I'm like, So I've just kind of, I don't know, I've just tried to, I'm not the smartest guy, but I pay attention and I learn. And I don't know, that's where I got it. That's, you know,
It's very fascinating to me because when you get a chance to sit with a millionaire, when you sit with a billionaire, um, it's pretty astounding the characteristics and the similarities of racing, right? You've got to have the fire in the belly. You have to be self-disciplined. You have to be able to avoid distractions. You have to be able to prioritize. And the fact that you're willing to take that opportunity to meet, greet, talk, yeah, you're trying to give them the best experience. That's what they're paid. You know, they're paying a premium to be in a limousine to get from point A to point B, and you're going to make sure that that's there. It's been my experience. I've never met a millionaire that if you ask a question, won't take the time to answer the question. The people that they don't want to rub elbows with are the people that are like, give me a job or give me a loan. They're like, those are a dime a dozen. But if you're asking me, how did I do it? If you're asking me, they'll give you all the time in the world. A lot of times they'll let you spend time with them. A lot of times they'll lend you some resources. A lot of times they'll invite you on some trips. And I've never met an entrepreneur that is a successful millionaire, billionaire. I've got a few that are billionaires, and they'll give you as much time as you need or want. But based on what you've just said, every person that's given you an opportunity, you've knocked that door down and just kept going. Do you mind transitioning okay, racing career is officially over. Because I'm really intrigued. I personally don't know the story about you moving from a racer through college. Now you get back into this journalistic, or I shouldn't say back. How did you segue into journalism? Was that what your degree was in college?
I took some journalism classes, but with my reading level, I never imagined I'd ever write anything that would be published. I just hoped I'd write emails that people could understand. So it took a lot of work to get where I am now, as far as, with the English language. But I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do afterward? And I knew after working in dealerships, the job that I wanted to be a rep for Kawasaki, Parts Unlimited, Western Power, one of the big companies. That's the coolest job in the world because you get to go shop to shop, talk about the stuff, sell the products. And I really was fascinated, being a guy who grew up watching racing and wanting to be a racing star. Where does the money come from to make this whole thing happen? How do sponsors have money? Where do they? And I wanted to know I wanted to know how it got from warehouse to shop and the extra money for riders and how this whole ecosystem worked. So I studied that, checked those websites every day. I worked for a newspaper right out of college for a little bit. That had to be one of the worst jobs I've ever had, selling advertising. You want to talk about boiler room. Oh my God. But my brother needed some help. So he's, meanwhile, given up the dream of being an IndyCar driver. He got real close and he was either go all in or start a racing go-kart shop. He runs acceleration kart racing. It's like the Chaparral or Rocky Mountain of go-karts. Super successful, but it wasn't so successful when I graduated college. He was doing okay, but he really needed that next level. He needed some help. He needed somebody he could trust. I said, all right, dude, I'll come out to Vegas. I'll work with you for a few years, but I'm looking for a job. I told him what I wanted to do. He said, no problem. If you find that, you can leave. So, I took my experience from being a parts counter guy and I helped him kind of streamline that business the same way. He won't admit this, but he didn't have he had a website, but he wanted people to call in instead. I'm like, dude, stop, get us a shopping cart. What are you doing? Once he got the shopping cart, all good from there. Him and his wife have done an amazing job with the company, but I did work with them for a couple years, raced go-karts. I had owned a YZ426 for a short time. I found one for cheap in college. I decided I was done with dirt bikes. If you've ever ridden that bike, it's a piece of shit. It's the worst bike. You have to do a start technique. I said, that actually makes it easy to walk away from dirt bikes. I think I'm good. I think it's out of my system. Let me go just work in the industry, maybe a street bike, something like that. But at the go-kart track, they started doing these supermoto things. At supermoto, because they go to the kart track to practice. And we're racing karts, and I did pretty good in karts, but I just didn't have a passion for it. But we're out there and they're racing bikes and we're like, whoa, that looks fun. Of course, my brother buys one. I'm reluctant to try it because I know what's going to happen. As soon as I ride it, I'm hooked. I ride it, and the next week he's got another bike and we go racing. So we did Supermoto, AMA Supermoto series for a few years and spent a truckload of money doing that, but we had a good time.
So because you've mentioned now a couple times in this first hour together, you've mentioned a couple times, not a high reading level, can't put an email together beyond a 6th grade education level early on. How did you end up you took some journalism classes. How do you end up as a journalist? And correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I'm not even gonna punt in the dark. The first article that you ever did write got published where?
Thumper talk. So I'm a rep
Okay.
going around, and I have toyed with this, and I, like I said, I put a lot of effort into becoming a good writer by going to the writing center at ASU. They had a free writing center. I was like regulars with those guys. I knew them. I went in there multiple times a week. And like I said, I'm still not, Walt Whitman, but I can get through and look decent, enough. But I was talking to my buddies at Thumper Talk, the two Bryans over there, great guys. And I'm like, hey, you guys got this giant platform. What if I covered Supercross and just wrote up a little column on it? Because I was selling them stuff and they were very profitable. We're great partners. And I was like, yeah, there's one more thing I can do for you. I thought it would be fun. It would help my relationship with them. We did it. And that first year is when Dungy snapped at me in the press conference.
Mhm.
That was like my second press conference. And I took the online beating of my life. I don't know if you go back and read the comments on those videos. Nobody knew who I was. I was this anonymous guy. My words got taken out of context and they destroyed me. And I went, oh, okay. I was just playing around now. But if you're going to trash me, I'm going all in on this bitch. Let me show you what I can do. And I stuck around. I was going to let them run me away and hide. So I doubled down and went back. And I even got Dungy. People forget that I got him to apologize to me at the final round. Great guy. And he explained it was out of context, but the way that, the media in our sport piled on Mattress and these other guys, I was like, what a bunch of dicks. I'm like, that's not cool, man. The only guy that was kind of nice to me was Wygant. And he goes, I thought the question was fair, but I was like, but it really lit a fire. I'm like, oh, okay. These guys think they're something special. And meanwhile, I'm thinking they're not that special. They're a bunch of clinger-oners that don't know what they don't know. Just because you were a factory mechanic doesn't mean you know every aspect of all racing. And I'm like, you don't know what I know about the industry. I've raced at a pretty high level. I have a unique point of view that not a lot of people can offer. And that's why I think it's valuable. And I'm like, that's why I feel like I have something to bring people. So I wrote for them. Then I talked to Dan Lamb from MX Addicts, and that was fun. I really enjoyed working with Dan, but it was hard because he's kind of a introvert. So for him to go out and get sponsors and really make it work, it was tough. And, and then having Feld mess with him really pissed him off. And he did not like that. So he got out of it. And ironically, I ended up writing at Vital. I wrote for Vital for a year until Mr. Coombs called and literally let them have it and basically got me cut from there. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll do my own thing. Meanwhile, I've been working as a rep the whole time. And I would race whenever I feel like it. I wasn't, the last professional race I did was like the supermoto stuff. I tried Glen Helen in 07 and realized that this ship's passed. Like, don't do this anymore. Just stick to some fun races, Grand Prix, and just being a, enduro cross. I tried that twice. Second time, I don't know why I tried it, but I pick these little things and I just choose my own little personal battles. And that's how I've done it throughout the years while I worked in the industry. And yeah, this journalism thing, it was cool and I like it. And as Tucker Rocky and first Western Power Sports. So I'm writing for MX Addicts and these places and they're messing with me. And then they start using my daytime job to get to me. Zach Osborne tried to get me fired from Western Power Sports because I said he was a victim of unintentional bad karma in Colorado. And I was just like, wait, you're messing with my day job because I said you had bad karma because of what you did to Joey Savacci? Oh man. And, and that's what just bothered me. I was like, man, if I ever get out from under the thumb of, these guys to where they don't control. And I had some, and you were around, you saw when I got my divorce and life changed. I got an opportunity to change jobs. I went to Tucker Power Sports. They said I could do whatever media I wanted. Unfortunately, after a couple of years, they're out of business. So what do? I had to either make this media thing work or I don't know what to do. So I just pushed my chips in and went for it.
And if I'm not mistaken, Vital was the last magazine, we'll call magazines generically, right? Online websites. I think Racer X, one of the few, well, you've got Racer X, Dirt Rider. Not many magazines exist anymore, but was Vital the last, let's call magazine, whether it's online or print, that you worked for?
Well, I did work with my buddy Troy at 2-4 Speed.
That's right.
for like a minute. So I had been building my own platform. We decided to partner up. I get 2 4-speed and I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you all the Instagram follower. I'm going to get you all the stuff that I have. I had everyone go over and like that page and, and build that platform. I said, only one requirement. Whatever happens, I get to write what I want. The very first article I went to post was about Glenn Helen. And he told me it was too controversial. I'm like, you motherfucker, Troy. I asked you for one thing. But he's like, dude, but we're getting some traction. I mean, I've done some little stuff, but that was the first real one. And he's like, we're getting traction. We're going to get press passes. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I told you, I don't want to press pass because then they try and control you. He's like, well, we just got to play no, I don't have to play the game. So I'm like, that's it. No more partners. I'm on my own.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't realize the game that's played, with it's what and because of what that's what gets used. It could be, well, like anything in life, but a lot of the people that are using what I know about you is why I'm able to keep this job, because the people are smart enough to keep the enemies as close as possible, knowing if they get too far away and they start doing some honest discussions, journalistic, whatever it may be, a lot gets exposed, and there is a huge fear, unfortunately, in our sport that's surrounding. But that's not what we're talking about here today. You transition out, so now the last one you couldn't do it on the Glen Helen. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if my memory serves me right, that was the genesis for you going out on your own, last and for all. The Cooksey Media group is begun. The penthouse suite at the Trump Tower. Cooksey's name's on the door. Cooksey Media is on the 56th floor. You've got the gold. You've got everybody meeting and greeting you at the door. You've got the limo dropping you off every day in Trump Towers. So Cooksey Media is now arrived. What year was that? Seems like it was just yesterday, but I know it wasn't.
I don't know what you're describing, Coach, but
that's what everybody thinks, right? They see the end. They don't know the inputs. That's why I love you doing the show. But what year was that when you finally realized, okay, I cannot have any partners. I must do this solo?
I think that was 2019, 2020-ish, right around there. Right about the same time I had divorce, job change. You have, it's crazy how life hits you with all these different things. And, I had a really tough time when I was 16 when racing was pulled from me. I didn't realize a divorce could be that hard. Divorce, even a bad marriage, man, it's tough. It is a motherfucker. It really does. And it changes everything. And you find out people you thought were your friends weren't your friends. And it's tough. So going through that and having a job change, it would have been 2020 when I just really decided, you know what, screw this. And I was with Tucker Power Sports. I left Western. And as soon as I went to Tucker, I pushed my chips in because they said I can write whatever I want. That's part of my deal. So that won't affect my daytime job. And I started really pulling the curtain back and going full bore. And that's when I really got into it with Coombs and, it really went sideways. But, and then when I realized Tucker was going out of business, I'm like, oh no, I literally just torched any possibility of me ever going back to an industry job because they control so much. I could never go work for OGO, Fox, because they have so many ties to the racing industry and that mafia over there. So I'm like, it really did force me to do what I'm doing now. I got my real estate license because I was like, you get worried and you have family to provide for and you have to make a living. But I've done that a little bit and I still do it. And if anyone has real estate needs, hit me up. I will do a referral. I'm not really doing much agent stuff these days, but love that referral fee.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it just forced me to all in. I had to. And now I'm just doing it. I'm doing it my way. And, it's funny. I get so many people telling me, oh, you should do this or that. And like, listen, I'm doing it the way I want to do it. And I take everyone's consideration. I do. I consider what people say and, oh, this would be cool. You should do this but I'm going down in flames my way, Coach.
Well, and it's ironic because you're not going down, your empire is building week over week, day over day. That's why I was interested to see what year it was that you went in with both feet, because again, it doesn't matter what sport we're in, people only see the end product, right? Take Chase Sexton. Nobody sees the input. They only get to see the highlight. Nobody has seen what Cooper Webb's been through. We've only seen the end result. You can go through every rider from Tomac to Jet to everybody in between. And I think this is what's so cool about it is, sure, you've kind of snapped that gravitational pull It's the hardest, like anything, right? Doesn't matter if it's a company, getting in shape, breaking debt, whatever it is, getting started is always the hardest part. It's that gravitational pull. It's getting up one more time than you get knocked down. That's why I appreciate earlier in the conversation, 16, you got knocked down. How'd you get up? Blow out your shoulder, blow out your spleen. How'd you get back up? You know, you go into this career of being a journalist. You've gotten punched in the face several times. Not by anybody that you're intimidated by, but nonetheless, the system was worked in a way that you had to pick yourself up off your knees and get back up again. Then you finally decide, okay, I can say what I want. And then that company goes under because of some mismanagement by top guys. And now here you are back again on your own island. And it's like, okay, me and YouTube, we're about to become type friends here. It's about to get real. And I think people see your numbers. I don't know the exact number, but the percentage of month over month for the last 5 years is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's got to be pretty close to double digits month over month for the last 5 years. Because you're sitting at almost 50,000 now.
I think I got
Subscribers on YouTube.
40,000, but I think a lot of people don't subscribe, but they watch because they have that weird, like, oh, I'm not going to subscribe to that guy. My views are that of somebody who would have a couple 100,000 followers. I get about 150 to 200,000 unique viewers per month, and I'm getting between 500 and a million views a month.
And I just think those numbers are staggering because remember, when you've got no advertising media that you can go out on, you do become your own advertiser. You become the advertisee. You become the content creator. You become the platform that puts it out there. When you look, if we look at your YouTube success, we look at your position in the sport, we look at all of that. I want to ask you, was there any one failure that you have overcome? Maybe something that we've spoken about here today, or maybe something we have yet to speak about. What failure do you think's had the biggest impact on the success that you're enjoying right now?
On the success, I don't know. I would say it's just, well, I'd say the biggest one would be 16. I mean, my whole life would be different if I had continued to race. I think about who I would be, because I wouldn't have been able to develop the personality and the different things that I am now. And I wouldn't understand this whole machine that it is right now that I look at. And that's why people are like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, I just see it different because I've been with these brands. I've been at the shops. I understand how this whole economy thrives and eats itself, and how these Coombs family are ruling it like with an iron fist. And it just disgusts me. But then it makes me so mad when I see people just kissing their ass, but they're not doing it because they know it's right. They're doing it because maybe that guy can help me. And there's so much of that in this sport. If there's one thing I could get rid of in the sport, it's that. Can we just be responsible for ourselves and stop leaning on, like, just go do your actions and don't suck up to a scumbag because you think they might be able to do something for you later on, you know? And that happens so much.
Well, you and I have had some closed doors conversations with some people, and what was the consensus in that closed door? Everybody in that room wants the others to succeed. Instead of taking and taking and taking, it's like, how can I help your business grow? And we talked about that in a couple of meetings that we've been in. And it was very enlightening because you've got a lot of people who are jaded, and then they're coming into a meeting that they would like it to be where everybody's trying to work with each other instead of try to cannibalize and kill each other. But there's always that concern because everybody that walked in that room has been stabbed in the back, has been lied to their face. Like you said, nothing's better than going through a divorce and seeing who your true friends are. I've got a couple in this sport that, oh man, they came across as my best friend ever. And boy, did I find out whose spots were real and whose weren't, right? But when you look at what you just mentioned right there, the idea of the collective efforts of people getting in saying, hey, Chris, what can I do to help your business grow? Not with any other agenda other than I've got what I do. How can it complement your business? And then we were in a room, a dozen people, and they're all saying the same thing. And what happened? Shoop, everybody's boats rose to the next occasion. When you look at everything that you've been through, as we keep teasing here, everybody sees your success now. Everybody knows who you are. There's nobody in our sport that doesn't know who you are. And we've even talked about this, you know, you and I had a coffee together. We talked about the idea that even there's people who, quote unquote, will publicly say they don't like your presentation, they don't like this, that, or the next thing, are also the same ones that are sending you direct messages saying, talk about this, think about this. Have you noticed that? When you look at all of that, what do you consider your biggest success? You've got this YouTube, you've got the real estate, your children are grown up, they're healthy. What's Chris's biggest success in his own opinion?
I don't know if I'd call it success. The thing I'm most proud of is like when I left, you remember the house I had with the pool and a hot tub when I was working for Tucker, making really good money, to be able to suck up my own ego, move to a small condo. I don't think people understand. I sold my truck. I sold my bike. I knew it was going to be lean for the next few years. It's still not exactly what people might think it is, but I knew I've got to do this. I didn't have to do that. I chose to take this role, and I'm proud that I gambled on myself and it's working. So that would be what I'm most proud of, is the fact that I had the courage to do it. And it was tough, man. I'll tell you what, when I was first over at this condo, which I'm still here, and I'm trying to manage my finances as best I can and take Mr. Grondall's advice, and hopefully I'll be in a situation similar to him one of these days, but I try to learn from people like that. But I mean, I was driving Uber in between, in between real estate calls and shows. And that's humbling, man, to know, I have a college degree. I've worked for years. I've had a house, money. Now I'm renting, and I have a Hyundai Ioniq hybrid, and I'm Ubering between YouTube runs. It was humbling, and it still is. And that's something I'll never forget is, to get something, you have to start somewhere. And I don't know that a lot of people are willing to do that. I don't know that a lot of people are willing to just say, okay, let me take risk. I've got no money, but I'm going to sacrifice all the things I normally have and try and make this thing work.
I just want to clarify for those who don't know who Mike Grondall is. He's the founder of Planet Fitness. He was a large part of the Geico Honda's success in regards to bringing in sponsors, bringing in revenue. Very, very, very nice young man. Very nice man who is probably one of the most generous people that I've ever met. I know Chris and I have talked about it. As like you said earlier, his sons are phenomenal. His daughter's great. His wife's awesome. Just you would never know who they are and who they hobnob with. And Mike's going to kill me for saying this, but just to put it in perspective, his neighbor's Michael Jordan. So when you're talking about FU money and people who they don't need somebody's approval. They've been there, they've done that. They've built their own empire. It's not a second generation. It's not a third generation. He did it all himself, him and his brother. They've since sold it. So if you don't like what Planet Fitness is doing with transgender, Mike has nothing to do with that. So please don't send him any hate mails. But if you want to know somebody who's positively influenced our sport that he never wants any recognition for, that would be Mike. And we both consider him.
They have done their best to bury him because Mike is logical. He thinks things through, and he wants to make them work for everybody. And he has pissed the Coons off so bad that they won't even mention his name. When they go back and talk about the Geico Honda team, they say Marshak and Ziggy. They don't even mention Grondall as the owner. He saved that team, kept that team running. Kevin Windham is he's the richest former racer, period. And how he got there was working with Mike. He took Mike's advice. Mike took him under his wing and said, okay, you want to never work again? Here's what you do. X, Y, and Z. And Kevin Windham took to it, and he's more successful than any of our past champions. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, it's next level. Like you said, you've been in a situation where Mike's been willing to share some knowledge with you, and you've done everything he said, and the success isn't, again, millionaire entrepreneurs are not afraid to share the blueprint of success if you're willing to listen and you're willing to not just say that you're going to read a bunch of books, but actually do it. And that's the big difference right there. Chris, I do want to challenge you on this. Your career is far from over. That's for sure. I think especially with what you're doing on YouTube, even that whole platform is relatively new. Like you said, you're kind of hit the catapult button at about 5 years ago. But if you could do your career over, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
Gosh, which career? The YouTube career?
Anything that you think, when you look at from being born to where you're at today, let's call that your career. You got sports in there, you got finances in there, relationships in there. What would you do, or would you do anything differently?
Oh, I'd absolutely. Everybody would.
Sure,
And
sure.
let's just assume it won't affect, because I love where I'm at now. I could not be happier with where I'm at right now. And I know everybody says that, but if you could let me go back and fix a few things. When I was working at the Yamaha dealership, racing the arena crosses and riding local pro, I was not giving the effort I knew I needed to give. And I feel a little haunted by that. Like when you're going out there, taking the risk to go racing, and you know you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, it just stings. I just feel like I left so much on the table there, and I'm just like, what am I doing? That's part of the reason I just was like, okay, I'm not doing this. But I don't know. I look back, what I would change is I would make sure, like I said, I can live with failure and I can live with struggling if you do everything you can to make it happen. But when I would go back and take those times where I knew I didn't give everything, when I did mail it in, and fix those. I just wonder where that would lead me. So
See, I just find that astounding because that's exactly what Daniel Blair said on the show. And like I said, we've had Daniel Blair, Rhino, we've had some really good. Steve Hatch just dropped today, and, some very accomplished. And it's interesting to me. Daniel's biggest regret was I didn't leverage the opportunities. I think you're in good company in that regards because you're both very, very successful. And, both of your names are probably two of the most recognized names in our sport right now from a journalistic standpoint. Daniel's YouTube channel with the main event moto and all. So it's pretty cool that you put yourself into that category pretty quickly. So
yeah, I had to laugh, Coach, this weekend. I grew up in Salt Lake City. Some of my hometown friends, they don't watch a lot of YouTube. They'll watch my channel once in a while. But I was like, they're like, are you gonna go to the race? I'm like, I can't. They're like, what do you mean? I said, I'm banned. They're like, how would they know? I go, unfortunately, dude, they recognize me. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. So it's weird being at that level, but to explain it to those guys, they just like, what? No, dude, how used to like, yeah.
yeah,
So it's weird. It's weird being at that level.
it is crazy. It was just brought to my attention this last week that there's somebody that's pretty popular in our sport, and somehow or for some reason, I'm supposedly blocked on Instagram. I don't know enough about social media because I really have a disdain for it. But I'm like, why would they block me? Like, what have I said or how am I a threat to some of these people? I really did find that interesting. They're like,
You hang out with
you're
the bad guy. You hang out with the bad.
that's what I think is so funny is we all like to say that we believe in free speech, but then this whole idea that if I say something that you disagree with, first thing they're going to do is quote unquote either censor you or quote unquote kick you out of the club. I'm like, I don't know, it's just a different environment, and I don't live in a false reality. I just refuse to dive into the knee deep of such catty little high school games. I'm 57 as of this past week, and I'm looking at this going, dude, this is worse than I was in high school with a bunch of catty spineless people. I'm like, haven't we moved on beyond that? But it's, oh, you don't agree with me, so I'm going to block you, or I'm like, wow, okay. Like to your point, exactly. I didn't think I was on anybody's radar. I didn't think anybody really cared. Because I'm not here to try to stir the stink pot. I mean, if you ask me a question, I will always give you the honest answer. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be politically correct with it. And that's kind of like the person who liked to say he was one of my best friends and then told me that I needed to change who I was hanging out with and what I was like, hold on, stop. This doesn't make any sense to me. And then I never have spoken to him since. So that's another story for another day. It's not relevant to what's right here. Chris, I always end the show with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready? I'll tell you what, before we get into rapid fire, is there anything that you think the listeners need to know about Chris Cooksey that they don't know about you?
I'll be honest. I don't think they need to know anything. I'm surprised anyone even really gives a crap. I appreciate so much that people listen to my opinions. And if I tell them one thing, I was like, I've been through this and I have a perspective. And that's what I like to tell people, like, who are you to say I've raced, I've been in the industry, I've been around the media. I've got a completely different view than most of the talking heads out there. And I think that's what you're going to get from me. You're not going to get something that's the same. You're going to get a different opinion. And that's why I have that opinion. I've raced karts, I've raced supermoto, I've raced motocross, I've tried to race, I've done different stuff. So I have a very wide scale of what I'm talking about and I study it. So that's why you should listen to me. And no, you shouldn't listen to everything I say. Make your own damn opinions, but I'm just giving you my authentic opinion.
You made a comment, made me think of something. Aren't you the first person in the motocross history that's had the FBI called in on you?
That's not an act of pedo, probably.
Because I'm trying to think who else in our sports had the FBI called on them.
I believe Kevin Walker probably did.
That would make sense. And I was thinking maybe, as I said that out loud, maybe the Mickey Thompson maybe situation with
Oh, That one,
Yeah.
that one was gnarly. They did some
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah, in modern day motocross, as far as promoters pulling dirty tricks, that might be one of the dirtiest ones.
Well, and not to stir the stink pot, but just what I think is interesting is the FBI was called on a comment that was posted on YouTube. So that to me in itself was funny. And that's evidence nowadays is a comment that was taken out of context, by the way, but that's another story. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you,
YouTube.
Tar, my moto member, Tar. Thank you, my man. You got my back 100%. We were just kidding, FBI. We were just kidding. Nobody was doing anything. Tar was being funny. So
I just can't believe you type something like that, and that's considered, you know, the fact that you can have an entire. Anyway, that's not what this show is about. We'll leave that one alone, Chris. We've had our own conversations about that. Chris, first and foremost, on behalf of all the listeners, before we get into this rapid fire, I know I've learned a lot about who Chris Cooksey is, and I know the listeners are going to appreciate and enjoy it. And if you haven't been following Chris, I would encourage you to do so. If you're new to the channel, like I say, there's a backlog of information. He's doing 3 to 5 videos a week, some about racing, some about circumstances and situations, stuff like tough blocks, people getting hung up on them. Just even this past weekend, look at RJ in the, what was it, practice, I think it was, hung his foot up on that and got kind of cartwheeled through the air.
in the heat race, it could have cost him the championship. But
yeah,
let me just, since you started Tough Blocks, you got to let me have a second here.
no, absolutely. No, because I want people to understand it's not about stirring the stink pot. It's about talking about things that are catalysts for change.
Well, and I've been around the sport. I've had friends. We see the injuries. We see how fast it goes from a fun day to life-changing, like Jerry Robin. Now, these Tough Blocks cause at least 2 to 3 accidents a weekend. 2 to 3 a weekend. Every single time that happens, that could be a life-changing incident. And they're stupid. Like, the thing is I have a better option. That's that one they use in the Para Supercross that just bends. There's options out there. Why the hell are these cowards on these teams and riders? Can anyone just speak up instead of just taking the risk because they don't want to offend anyone? Well, somebody's going to get hurt really bad unless you hurt someone else's feelings and tell them they need to fix the damn Tough Blocks.
Well, here's what was, somebody DM'd me and said the reason why the Tough Blocks will stay there is because Cooksey recommended that they be removed. And if they're removed, it will show that Cooksey was correct. That's what several people have DM'd me directly or indirectly that message. So take that for what it's worth.
It might be, Coach, but that shows you the ignorance. They're willing to hurt their own product because they don't want me to be right. It's not me being right. It's obvious. Like, everybody knows, like anyone who watches a race, show that race to anybody who's brand new to the sport. And they go, why are those blocks there? It's not just me. So they can do that, prove me wrong. I think it's crazy that you would make that kind of a decision based on me and my YouTube channel. Like, are you serious? Wow.
Well, you had the FBI called on you based on a comment in YouTube channel. So it's not as far-fetched as you think. But again, for those of you that are new, this is what Chris is good about, is he just doesn't throw something out there. It's here's the problem, here's a suggested solution. I mean, you've put it up there in your videos. I mean, with the phone number, the contact, you even talked about the price it would cost, how much it would save instead of taking half a dozen 18-wheelers down the road with bales of hay and stuff. But that's what I want the new listeners, because we do get quite a few new subscribers every month, which we're forever grateful for. But this is the type of stuff that Chris is adamant about. He wants catalysts for change, when he's not into redistribution of wealth, but he is into the idea that, hey, let's model previous success, whether it be NBL, hockey, football, F1, MotoGP. It's not about saying that the promoters make too much money. It's just about just changing perspective on how other sports have grown for the benefit of all involved. That's all. It's just one of the many examples that Chris has laid out there. So
one of the biggest things that people think is I don't want the promoters to be rich. I want them to be richer. I want them to make more money because I want the sport to grow. And my only aspect of this is it won't grow if you don't help the people who are doing the work that we pay to go see and make them a base. And I just give them historical options of other sports who've done this, who've gotten bigger, and the promoters make more money. I don't know why, but I understand they don't want to. You might have to lose a little bit here and there, but they're about to sign that giant TV deal. Nobody's losing anything when that TV deal comes, but they don't have to hoard all of it.
Well, think about this, and we get into economics 101, right? How can they pay Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods Nike pay them the hundreds of $1 million? Well, just using a 10x multiple, right? If they're paying Tiger Woods 40 million, they're probably making 400 million on them. That's just the raw reality of it. But nobody has a problem with Tiger Woods making 40 million or Jordan making 40 million because they know that Nike's making the money over and above that. It just validates the point that you're saying right there. Nobody should be told that they make too much money, because if Nike can afford to pay Tiger Woods 40 million, Nike's making money on that. Not, now I want to be careful on the semantics there. There's nothing wrong. We understand that the riders are the draw, but the riders aren't making anything in relationship to. You see the difference? You could pay Tiger Woods 40 because Nike's making 400 million. Well, when we use the equation or utilize the equation backwards, if you look at what the promoters are making, and you said, all right, the top 40 guys, top 100 guys that we have in our sport, again, this is not about distribution of wealth. It's the idea, but that's not what this show's about. This show's about you, Chris, as a person. But that's what I love about your platform, because it's this type of mature thinking. And hey, we're not saying that our solution's the only solution. Somebody who has an economics background, or somebody like you being involved inside and seeing how the dollars are spent, how the dollars are made, how the money is distributed between a distributor. I think of Parts Unlimited with Chad Reed and Thor. That was just so eloquently rolled off. We always heard Chad say, I'd like to give a shout out to the guys at Parts Unlimited, Thor. It was just an extension. Didn't sound like a sales pitch, but we always put Parts Unlimited and Thor together. I'm sure the guys at Parts Unlimited appreciated that.
Well, and what's funny too, Coach, is so I graduate out of college, I get in the motorcycle industry, and have this thing in my head that Davey Coombs and all these people in our sport are like these mad geniuses and great people because you look up to them. Wow, was that shattered as I get closer up to it, and you see the people making the decisions that they make financially and why, and people running different companies. I saw this, my very first the general manager of Tucker Rocky back in the day, or the CEO, Steve Johnson. This dude, if you hung out with him, you'd be like, that guy's an idiot. He was the smartest guy. He would go and sit and analyze everybody. Then after that, they got rid of him, and a bunch of people were happy. Oh, this really smart, well-spoken guy come in. Moron. So you just have to be careful of who you talk to, and because they're charming does not make them smart. It actually might make them a little bit more dangerous.
Well, we got a president voted in because he was an articulate speaker, so we'll leave that alone. All right, my man. Rapid fire. You ready for, left field questions? You ready for this?
Fire away.
Who was your first non-moto hero?
Non-moto hero. That's hard because I didn't look up to anyone that wasn't moto. I would say Dale Earnhardt.
Okay. How about your 3 non-negotiables? I think I know one based on what you said a little bit earlier, but I don't want to put words in. Non-negotiables.
In what?
Just in life, For example, my dad said that the 2 things he despises is a thief and a liar. So to me, those are non-negotiables. But
I was just about to say, first, I need somebody who's not a liar. Listen, As humans, we all bend and stretch the truth, but there's a difference between complete liars. If someone's a liar, I don't want them around me. If they're doing things, if you've got a friend who's stealing from the gas station and they're cheating on their wife, and somehow you think they're this good person, they're not. It's a pattern. And I look for those patterns, and I do judge people by the patterns and how they treat people. So I would say that's one of them. I would say loyalty. I am a big fan of loyal people, and I look for people who understand that we're not perfect, and they will, hey, I make mistakes, you make mistakes, but you don't write them off because of them. If you just move on or dispose of people, that's a red flag to me. And then, I don't know. Kindness. I look for nice people. I like Grondall because he's such a nice dude, man. Mike Grondall is the nicest guy that I've talked to, and he's mad genius. So you get guys like just basic stuff, and pretty much my friend group these days is really tight. I've got probably about 4 or 5 real friends. And other than that, I got a bunch of acquaintances, but there's only a few people I'd call. If you needed help, you could call me anytime. I've got about 4 or 5 of those people.
Amen to that. What advice would today's Chris Cooksey give his younger self?
Oh man, suck it up, dude. Stop whining. And when you get the opportunity, everything you do it well. If you work at McDonald's, be the best damn McDonald's worker. And like I said, it's something I've picked up, but it's not something I always had. And man, I feel bad for the poor managers. When I worked at the Yamaha dealership, I thought everything was owed to me. Oh, I look back and I used to get so mad and think they're disrespecting me. And I'm like, man, I was an idiot. Oh, if I could go back and tell Doug Smith, the owner of that place, man, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for teaching me and putting up with me, because I was a tool.
I was a tool. I love it. This has been a very popular question on the rapid fire. In your opinion, no political correctness whatsoever, who do you think in your phone right now, who is the most important person in your phone? Not the important, the most influential that the listeners may or may not know. Who would you say is the most influential person in your phone?
Gosh, I would have to say Grant Langston.
Okay.
I thought you were gonna say the most called. I'm like, definitely my girlfriend Crystal. We text like a couple of children. So yeah.
No, it's good.
But yeah, Langston's probably the most influential, just because he's got clout, he's got the ability to speak. I'm trying to think. I got some MMA people that are pretty big, but I don't know Dana White. That would be the biggest, but I don't have his number.
Well, you may have just answered that question. If you could get somebody in your phone, who would it be? Would it be Dana White?
Yes, Dana White or the Trumpster, because I got some issues with Trump right now. I'm not pleased with them not putting anyone in jail. Hopefully by the time this airs, I want some people to go to jail. So
Yep, that's fair enough. What would you, let's say it's Dana White, what would be, you have a chance to get him on the phone, what would be the first conversation you'd have with him?
I would probably just ask him about the business. Honestly, I have so many just random MMA questions. I would just like to know how they get, where they get. And I really want to know. So he gets a lot of heat, as do, promoters of Supercross, for lack of pay. But I look at what he does for his athletes. He builds them training facilities. He pays them pretty reasonable. It's not at the same percentage as like some of the other sports, but what he doesn't tell people, and I know this because I have some friends who've gotten checks in the mail after they fought in the UFC, and all of a sudden the check will show up for 40,000. And they do random things like that Dana White never gets credit for. And I would just like to know, is there a formula for that? How do you judge how much so you don't get taken advantage of, or you're doing enough? Like, there's a balance between profit and taking care of people. And I would like to know how he sees it. Because most of the time I'm on his side as far as fighter pay, but it's tough. It's, you're running a business. It's tough.
What is the first item on your bucket list?
I don't even have a bucket list.
Okay.
If I have something I do, like if I have something that I really want to do, I do it. I don't just fantasize about it. I want to go to Thailand. My buddy Mark Savage had the opportunity to get me over there, and I got that off my bucket list. I don't know that there's anything really glaring on my bucket list, because if I come up with something, I usually try and find a way to make it happen.
Well, and I owe Mark an apology, because he and I tried to connect several times and we just kept missing each other. That was such a cool thing that he did, and I was glad that you got a chance to go over there. The last question I have for you is, what was the last song you listened to?
Song. Oh man, I don't listen to a lot of songs because I always play podcasts.
Okay.
Andy, can I do my podcast instead of song?
Absolutely.
Andy Frisilla. Have you ever listened to him, Coach?
No, sir.
Real AF. Just salt of the earth. Calls it how he sees it. He owns First Form, the fitness
Supplement company. Yep.
Yes. And I listen to him, and he gets in there, and he is just doesn't care. He's telling you what he thinks, and he's so logical. Like, it reminds me, listening to him, it's like almost like talking to you or Grondall or somebody. Like, it's
I
just,
appreciate
yeah, it's pretty
I
cool.
appreciate it. Well, brother, I can't thank you enough. I know the listeners are going to enjoy this. If you guys have any questions that you may have, obviously keeping some level of respect, feel free to put it in the comments. I know you guys are good on DMing me. This platform of YouTube, I always think this is interesting, Chris. We talk about social media, and then people will put comments and then nobody engages with them. You do a great job. You go through and you read your questions, as long as it's not some keyboard warrior. But, it's just the whole idea that I want these types of podcasts. If there's a question that you have about Chris that you'd like more clarity on, throw it in the comments. Chris is really good about, looking at the comments and responding. Just like when I'm on Chris's show, I try to do the same thing out of respect for engaging with you guys, and that's super important to us. But Chris, thank you so much, man. I know everybody enjoyed this. I know I've learned more about who Chris Cooksey is, and I'll leave you with the last word, my man.
I just want to thank you, Coach. I've seen where you've gone in the last few years and the amount of knowledge that you have. And I just appreciate you, man. I am so happy to call you friend. And, your relationship means a lot. And I was really worried when Hopper and I got into it and you were like our dad in the middle. And I'm like, how you've maintained a friendship with both of us just goes to show the quality of a human being you are. I really appreciate you, Coach, and thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the kind words. I consider you a dear friend as well, and I'm glad we got a chance to do this. I think the people have a better understanding of the real Chris, and I can't thank you enough, brother. For all of you guys that are here, again, thank you for all the subscriptions. Thank you for all the likes, and we want to thank Complete Med Solutions for making this podcast happen. And we will see you guys next month. Be safe.
Meet the Guest. Next chapter. Part of the Coach Robb Podcast Network.